Bonsoir French students, ça va? Comment allez-vous? Hey, as you can see, we are ready to jump into le chapitre 1. So we're going into chapter 1. We're all wrapped up with le chapitre préliminaire. You're in the middle of taking the test for that, but we'll begin chapter 1 with some cultural topics. So we'll start with kind of some fun material here before we start to get into some grammar and vocabulary for this chapter. So you'll see a couple of pages from the e-textbook Horizon, and we'll be talking about le monde francophone, in other words, the French-speaking world. And this time the region we're talking about is la Côte d'Azur. And what that means is basically the blue coast, which is kind of referring to, I guess, being on the sea and all the beautiful water that's right there on the south of France. And so we're looking at the southern coast. So as it tells us here, it says La Côte d'Azur est une des plus belles parties de la France. So plus belle. You can probably guess, I hope you can guess, what the meaning of the word belle might be. If we're kind of thinking about a woman's name like Isabella, it's kind of related to beautiful. So we can say, or we can know, that this is one of the most beautiful parts of France. Et aussi une des plus fascinantes. So you can probably guess that that means fascinating, right? So et aussi, and also, une des plus fascinantes, one of the most fascinating areas of France. So as you can see over here to the left on the map, we're looking at this region of France that's kind of like to the southeast. And there are a couple of typical places that they're going to talk about in this chapter in the south of France, like Nice and Cannes and all these kind of famous cities that people have heard of. I'll add a couple from my own experience too that I just think are really beautiful parts of this area of France. Okay, so first they tell us a little bit about Nice. I think most of us have probably heard of Nice before. It looks like nice in English, but it's pronounced Nice in French. So the picture we see here is La promenade des Anglais à Nice. Okay, in English we might see this word like promenade, and it's basically a place for walking, right? So in French it's pronounced promenade. Okay, des Anglais. We already know that the name for the language we all speak as a native language, English, is this word anglais. So it's like the kind of the walkway of the English in Nice. It almost reminds me of Charleston a little bit. Charleston, South Carolina, like the color of the buildings and the palm trees and everything. It's a little bit similar. So we're lucky to have such a place in South Carolina too. Okay, Nice est connue pour ses plages. So connu means to be known, and later on when you start to learn more verbs in French, you will learn the verb connaître, which means to know something, to become familiar with something. So connu is related to that verb, and it just means to be known or to be famous. Okay, so Nice est connue pour ses plages. So if you are in the south of France, you will definitely want to visit les plages, and those are the beaches. Et pour sa célèbre promenade. I think you can make some good guesses about the words here. Célèbre looks just like celebrity, right? So it's this famous walk. Tout le long de la mer. Oh, all along the sea. So tout le long just means all along. La mer is the sea. La promenade des Anglais. L'endroit parfait pour faire une course matinale. Okay, and they've given you some vocabulary to kind of gloss through down here at the bottom of this page, so that does help you out too. But this part, this long expression here, l'endroit parfait pour faire une course matinale, just means the perfect place for a morning run. Okay, and so that's a little bit about Nice. Okay, a couple of other locations they tell you about here. One is La Ville de Grasse. So if you're looking at the map here, it's pretty close to Nice, a little bit more inland. So this is a place that's connu, again famous, pour la fabrication de parfums. You've probably seen this word on really nice, expensive perfumes, right? Parfum. So this UM at the end is a nasal sound. Remember that nasal sounds, that sound has to travel through your nose. So parfum, fun. And the S is silent, even if we're talking about more than one perfume. So fabrication just means making, manufacturing, to fabricate something, in other words. So this place is famous for its perfumes. And then we have Les Gorges de Dalhuy. A gorge, I think we already know this word in English too. It's basically like kind of a cut between two mountains, right? So Les Gorges de Dalhuy sont fantastiques. So they are fantastic. Et excellentes. Okay? They're excellent too. Pour faire du rafting. This word is exactly the same as English, so this is borrowed into French from English. So this is a great place to go and do some rafting if you're in the south of France. Okay, a couple of other places that we'll look at on the next page. So the question here asks us, voulez-vous voir les œuvres de Picasso? So you know for sure who Picasso is, right? So they're asking us, do we want to see the works of Picasso? So, voulez-vous, you probably know this expression already from, wasn't it that Christina Aguilera song, voulez-vous coucher avec moi ce soir? Voulez-vous just means do you want? It's the formal way of asking that. So, voulez-vous voir? Do you want to see? Les œuvres. Notice that in French, this O and this E right here are kind of smashed together. And you do see that occasionally in some words. They kind of retain that sort of archaic spelling. That O and that E and the U, all that together just sounds like kind of like good in English. It's close to that sound. Les œuvres. And here we have a liaison also between the S in les and the word œuvre. So œuvre just means work, like a work of art. So if you go to Vallauris, le Musée Picasso, in that town, the Picasso Museum, you can see some of his most famous works. And then we have another place on the south of France called Antibes, La Plage à Antibes. And what does La Plage refer to again? You probably guessed it, the beach. And this would be a great place to go and spend some time at the beach. And then finally, the last location they talk about here, there is a sentence referring to Antibes. So, la plage à Antibes est très belle. So what would you guess about Antibes? What kind of place is this? It has to be beautiful, right? And everybody has heard of the Cannes Film Festival. In English, we would pronounce it Cannes, right? In French, it would be Cannes. Cannes est connu. Hey, you already know this expression from the previous page, right? So it's famous for what? We can make lots of guesses about vocabulary here. Pour son fameux festival du film. So everybody knows about the Cannes Film Festival, right? So it's famous for its film festival. Et aussi, and also, pour le Festival des plages électroniques de Cannes. So it's a festival, it's at the beach, there's something electronic going on there, and it's happening in Cannes. So we can easily guess this is a festival of electronic music, right? Un festival de musique électro. So it's electronic music. Okay, and underneath the picture it says, sur la côte d'Azur, ça bouge. Remember ça va? Like, how is it going? That expression that we use to greet people informally. Ça bouge means that basically that moves. So it's like it's happening, it's trendy, it's a cool thing. Okay, so in your next exam, in the exam for chapitre 1, you might see questions related to le savez-vous that you see right here. So, quelle chose, what thing, de la liste correspond à chaque endroit? So, what thing in the list goes with each place? So, Vallauris, what do you remember about this place? And if we go up a little bit, we can see Picasso, right? And so, Picasso would be le Musée Picasso, the Picasso Museum. Grasse, do you remember what went along with this one? What's that famous thing that they manufacture in that small town? So if you remember from the previous page, it would be la fabrication des parfums. So if you want to get really beautiful, great perfume, that would be the place to visit. And la promenade des Anglais à Nice. Okay, what could you do on that walkway there, that beautiful place? Of course, you could go running in the morning, une course matinale. And Cannes, everybody knows what this is famous for films, but also for les plages électroniques, so for a famous music festival. And finally, les gorges de Daluy. Of course, we can go rafting there, le rafting. Okay, so that's what the book introduces to us, but there are a couple of other places in the south of France I think that are worth mentioning. One of them that I had the chance to visit is Montpellier, and it's basically in the same region. If we look at a map of France, and we can easily do that by checking Google Maps, you can see that Cannes is over here, and if we just keep on traveling along the southern coast of France, we see Montpellier. And underneath that, we are right into the Mediterranean Sea, if you scroll down just a bit. So all of that is the Mediterranean Sea. And this, for me, was my first experience of swimming in salt water in my whole life. And it was just an absolutely fantastic experience. The Mediterranean Sea is really, really beautiful. And just some pictures to look at of Montpellier. It has this really beautiful plaza. You can see the blue sky and how just absolutely beautiful it is. And so this was definitely one of the places in France that I was the happiest to visit. It brings back good memories to see all those pictures. The other place that I remember visiting, also in the south of France, is Avignon. And to take a look at this on the map, you can see it's actually very close to Montpellier. And now that I think about it, this town that's in between, Nîmes, has a really famous Roman kind of amphitheater. And it's ruins, but it's still pretty well preserved, and that's really beautiful too. I had a friend who lived in Avignon, so she kind of took me on sort of a tour of this little area right here, and it's really, really beautiful. So Avignon, this is a picture of the square of the kind of the plaza that you would see if you went to visit this town. It's also very, very beautiful. And while we're at it, very quickly, we'll take a look at Nîmes. Oh, and there is the picture of that spectacular Colosseum there. So yeah, Rome is a great place to visit to see ruins of the Roman Empire, but Nîmes is a pretty great place to visit too. It's a smaller, you won't run into as many tourists, and it's definitely a very, very beautiful place. So that's just to give you a little bit of extra information about the south of France. Everybody thinks of Paris when they think about going to France, and Paris is wonderful. But I think there are lots of other very beautiful places to visit in France. So just a few destinations to keep in mind for the future someday. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this tour through the south of France. And I'll be back to you again a little bit later this week with the first topics of grammar and vocabulary for chapitre 1. Bonne nuit!